A massive operation now going on in what is now becoming the restive north in this country. Let's listen to President William Ruto speaking about the operation and the disarmament. There have been attacks, there have been killings, people have lost their lives, and now the government is saying enough is enough, putting a stop to it. Here's President Ruto on that operation that is now underway.
Kuna bunduki ambayo sio halali, ambayo hajapatiwa na serikali, they must surrender in 3 days. Na tumesema kwa sababu wale watu wamekuwa wajeuri, wamekuwa na kiburi mingi. From tomorrow we are moving into that area, and we will not leave that area until every illegal gun has been returned, until all children have gone to school, until we have stopped this menace.
So the operation is now underway. Jamila, what an interesting, few months or weeks we have seen of violence. Before we talk about this disarmament, tell us how we got here. There've been, there's been quite some attacks and killings lately.
Yes, which have been going on for years.
Yeah.
And I remember last week in Kainuk, 3 police officers were killed. And they just were adding into this statistics of officers who have been killed in the North Rift in the past so many years. And many of them are young officers who are straight from their academy, who don't have much combat experience, and then they've been thrown into harm's way, in those areas of Kapedo, Suguta, Baringo East, Marakwet East, and Turkana South, among other places, and they've lost their lives. But also, apart from them, there are the scores of innocent children and women and men and families that have lost their lives. People who have been displaced. There are people who, it's a cycle really, Yvonne, of their lives, that they rarely have a moment's peace. And even if they do, it's very short. And then the cycle starts all over again. And then I remember, and I think Linus would remember, I think in the 90s, there was a former Rift Valley Provincial Commissioner, Ismail Juma Chelanga, who was from the Marakwet community, and there was also the DC James Nyandoro, who died in Suguta Valley after the helicopters were separately shot down. So it's just not the innocent women and children and the young police officers, even senior government officials have been killed. And I think since the current Minister of Interior was sworn in October 2022, I think over 40 people have been killed.
Yeah. And
then these attacks are so frequent, Yvonne. And they're happening right before the government's eyes. In places where the minister has visited, you hear the next day there's been attack, or the same day there's been attack. It's like almost they're taunting the government in terms of kujeni tuko tu hapa mtatupata. And these people are armed, these people are organized, these people have done this for a long time. It's almost like a generation-to-generation thing.
Yeah.
And I was listening to Governor Natembea, who was RC Rift Valley for a while, speaking about it, and he talked about how there wasn't much government support when he was trying to fight these bandits. They would not have enough resources. They would not even have basic things like fuel for their vehicles. They would not have support that they expected from the government of the day. And they're really almost like sitting ducks when they're trying to deal with these bandits, who again are blatantly and openly fighting back, Yvonne. And I think it's about time that action really is taken. And I think we should listen to what those residents of Chemolingot was saying on the operation that's coming as we continue.
Yeah.
Monica, do we have it? Do we have the residents on the operation that's coming? Yes, we can listen to that.
Tunasema tu tunaona kibara lakini kibara haingii msituni. Sini mtu anakaa mlima tu kama hapa. Hata siku nyingine tulikuja kufanya kamba na hapa tuliishi shule. Alafu alitoa sisi kwa hii shule kwa lazima. Na ikachukuliwa hii maboma yote mali. Na tukafukuzwa kabisa.
Sasa hii serikali wafanye kazi, si kusema hatuwezi pea nini? Hatuwezi pea wakora, hatuambii tafadhali, lakini saa hizi wameanza kusema tafadhali. Tunawapea siku 3 mulete silaha, lakini tunaona hiyo labda watumie mbinu nyingine, sababu hata wakituma hiyo wanajeshi tunaona hawatatoboa huko, labda watumie vitu kama ndege ama nini, sababu hii wakora ni hatari sana.
Alisalute saa 6 ya mjana na kusema, wanamheshimiwa, tumevukusa kutoka milima ile mpaka huko chini mahali kidogo. Bandit iko kwa milima uvuletu, hii milima ya Karkarun, Tandar, Ngelecha, Lurumuru, Ramacha, bandit imejaa.
Wakuja operation tukatai, lakini watake mkora mwenyewe na waende mahali hiyo shida imefanyika. Kama ndio mosi huko, waende huko. Kerio ni mbali kwa sisi, huko Tirioko chini yake ndio tunasikia huko ndio maneno imefanyika. Na sisi hatungependa kusema ati tunapigana serikali.
Serikali wanatupea operation na hakuna kenye tumefanya. Tuko town tunafanya biashara. Ndio hiyo makazi sasa imeharibika. Kama mimi sasa mimi ni mama mboga. Nauza mboga saa 11, mboga inafika saa 10, saa 11 tunafunga. Sasa tutaanzia wapi na tuko na watoto wanaenda shule na ni mboga ndio tunalisha nayo, tutaanzia wapi?
Sisi hapa si watu wakora, sisi ni watu ambao tunafanya biashara zetu. Na wakora wako outskirts. Tungekuwa wakora area yote ya sub county yote haingekalika. Na ningeomba serikali watafute njia mwafaka ya kutafuta wakora. Watafautishe mtu innocent na mtu ambaye yako mkora. Hiyo ndio kitu tungeomba.
And Yvonne, you know that's their fear, really, when the operations begin. Waliomo na wasiokuwemo wanaweza kujipata. And they're speaking from history, from a point of knowledge about past operations that have happened where wananchi, majambazi, waliomo, wasiokuwemo have all been found to have been caught in the same net, Yvonne, and that's the fear that they have.
And you know, they call it collective punishment. That's what happens in operations like this, where you find that the security forces, sometimes out of frustration, out of lack of information, out of many things that are related to such a complex operation, will then target everybody, basically. And there were fears, for example, that when it comes to the military, they follow the scorched earth policy, which is anything in sight is game. And there is something that just remains a puzzle when it comes to the affairs of the North, because all governments since independence have really had to deal with and grapple with this problem of the North. And, you know, we should not look at the Pokot, Marakwet issue and Turkana as in isolation. You can look at the entire northern circuit, basically, and I think the Gazette notice captures the areas that are affected. But you can go also further up to Marsabit, and before that there'll be Wajir and the likes of Mandera. And when you look at the whole area, to the south of Ethiopia, south of Sudan, and east of Uganda, there is a similarity, there is a pattern to how those problems basically persist. Because all these pastoralist communities, they are all living in very arid, difficult terrain. They rely entirely on animals, that's livestock. And that's the economic model. They move from one place to another. But then there is what we can call disagreeable lifestyles, like cattle rustling is part of the game around these areas. And when you look at our neighboring country of Uganda, they have had to deal with a similar situation in Karamoja region. And Karamoja region, remember, has about 4 districts. It's a very, very expansive area. Way back in 2000, and this was about a few years after President Museveni won the 2001 election, he actually decided to go there and camp in Karamoja region to lead the operation against the cattle rustling activities there. And again, it followed the script that we are seeing here, where you give a deadline to surrender of arms. Because one of the common problems around all these areas, whether you're talking of Sudan, Uganda, Kenya, Ethiopia, and Somalia, is proliferation of arms. It's so easy to get arms there, and very complex arms. You know, you're talking of high caliber machine guns. You can find all that, and it's in the hands of these pastoralists. What Museveni did was to establish a Ministry of Karamoja Affairs, which basically attends to the issues of that area. And then something else that Uganda did was to establish a military base in those areas. They did solve the problem to a large extent, yes. The Karamoja issue is not as problematic now as it was in the 80s and the early 90s in Uganda. But is force the only option? I don't think so. There's a lot of education that also needs to go to these regions. There's a lot of opening up of these areas as well, so that they feel that they are part of the rest of the country. Because you notice, and you'll go north and they'll tell you Habari Kenya, you know, because they think and feel they're not part of the country. Because just like the historical development patterns followed, development was in the south, high potential areas. Why would you want to put Mangu High School in what was the name of Chemolingot? Or
Baragoy.
Yeah, you wanted high potential area, fertile soils, close to the railway line. So there's an element of marginalization that also needs to be addressed, and that will also go hand in hand with education and educating the community and making sure that there'll be a majority of enlightened people having gone to school and out of this traditional lifestyle.
Yeah, and when you take a look even at those regions, and you know, you can see, you know, just what that terrain looks like. This is, you know, harsh terrain. This is, you know, out quite literally, you would say, in the wild. I mean, you know, this is definitely some areas that are pretty hard to reach, probably well known by the locals and the bandits who are there and who, you know, patrol the area, which is why every time even the Cabinet Secretary for Interior, Dr. Kindiki, has gone there, the very next day, you know, we see an attack. And one of the things I think for me, when I recall what's been happening in this region, we all remember that attack at Suguta Valley, where those 42 officers were literally led into a trap and killed. Out of them, I think there was 18 who were APs. And that for me just stands out as, that tells you how this is a big issue and how, you know, operations like these have sadly not been successful. And maybe like Linus is saying, you know, in addition to operations like these, more needs to be done long term that just sort of, you know, sort of calms down the restive north. But let's talk about the operation that is, you know, underway now. They had 3 days to surrender. I think that 3-day window expired today.
Today, yes.
By today, no single arms were surrendered. And so what they've said is, now that you've not surrendered any, if you are found with some of those, you know, we will now, it's now an all-out open war, and it's now being done by both the police and the military. Take us through, you know, what's happening now? What happens next? What happens starting tomorrow?
I've seen the police armored vehicles and the military armored vehicles are already making their way or have already made their way into the operation zone. So that gives you an indication that anytime from tonight, that operation kicks off. That, of course, includes the curfew that is being enforced, because the curfew was immediate. And it was gazetted. You remember the gazette by Professor Kindiki on the specific areas, divisions, up to the very location level, where the curfew is, those who are affected and those who are not affected. More or less like what we saw during the COVID period.
Although I have to say, I mean, just a pause with the curfew. You know, these attacks happen during the day.
Absolutely.
And I totally understand the need for a curfew, you know, just have everybody in so that when you conduct the operation, you know, you're truly looking for those people. But it just goes to show how daring these bandits are. I mean, curfew or not, these are people who roam these areas during the day, and that's when they commit their attacks.
Absolutely. In fact, some of the sound bites, when we were producing this, I listened to some of the people, residents, saying that these guys come at 10 a.m., 11 a.m., even at 1 o'clock. They drive you away, they occupy your house. We even saw some who even occupied schools and turned them into their homes, which is a very dangerous situation. But I look at it this way. The number of criminals in this country is way fewer than the number of law-abiding citizens. Number two, every so often, the government will use every opportunity to demonstrate its ability, capacity, and readiness to protect its people and their property. I mean, that's why we have a showcase every national day when the military marches past the president. We even have a fly past, you know, by the Air Force. I mean, the country is not short of weaponry to tackle any threat, internal and external. And if the country has, to a great extent, managed to deal with the question of terrorism, which is a far bigger problem, in my opinion, I could be wrong, but I think it has been a very, very big problem, then it means with the same willingness, with the same capacity, with the same resourcing of our security agents, it's possible to deal with the question of banditry. The only challenge with banditry has been, when you look at it in totality, there's a bit of politics involved in it, there's a bit of communal interests involved in it, and there's also the scramble. Yeah, there's also the scramble for resources.
Yeah.
Because every so often you will hear this community raided this community for cattle. This community and this community are quarreling over grazing fields, water, and so on and so forth. So yes, on one hand, it is important to develop these places, open them up, so that people now start feeling like they're part of the country, number one. Number two, education will also play a key role in developing some of these areas, and to help people also realize that some of these tendencies that have for a long time been there can be stopped, and you will still not lose your livelihood. However, we must also as a country address the seriousness of this issue in this sense. Number one, are there political players, leaders of influence, some even in government, some even in the academia, some even in the security forces who perpetrate, aid, finance, and train this banditry? Yes, there are. Because ordinarily, I would want to think somebody from the very interior of West Pokot, somebody from the very interior of Turkana, where would they get an M16 rifle from? Yeah. Where would they get
not even an AK-47, M16.
Where would they get it from?
Yeah.
It shows you the involvement of higher levels of people than the ordinary citizen there. Number two, if we are talking about herds of cattle that have been raided and are being transported from one point to another, those people pass in some areas that have security operations.
Police stations.
Yeah, police stations, chiefs camps, intelligence, because I believe our intelligence is all over. So there is need to address that. And more particularly, if we are saying there is a commercial aspect of this banditry, if those animals are leaving Baringo, West Pokot, Turkana, Samburu, and finding their way into Nairobi.
George Natembeya said they end up on your plate.
Yes, but those cows won't walk from West Pokot to Nairobi. They won't walk from Baringo to Nairobi. They will be transported in lorries and moved from one point to another. Yeah. All those areas you will find police roadblocks. How comes nothing has happened? And secondly, how comes these politicians that we keep talking about, these political leaders, these business people that we are told finance this part of the commercial venture of the banditry, how is it that they have not been arrested and prosecuted successfully? Is it lack of political goodwill? Well,
we have seen arrests, we have seen prosecutions, but we have seen, I think, there was an acquittal, I believe, of, was it William Kamket? And just tonight, he's innocent until proven guilty. David Pikosing is at the DCI. We have live pictures of that. Seth Olale is still there waiting to see what will happen, whether he will be released or whether he will be held overnight and produced in court tomorrow. So we'll let you know what happens. Seth is there. So the minute either he or his lawyers come out, will definitely take you there alive. And you raise, you know, an interesting issue. And I think George Natembeya talked about, you know, what's happening, that whole train of it, the commercial side of things. We'll listen to him in a minute, but Jamila, I know you wanted to jump in.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in quickly, Yvonne, about what we talked about, the fear that the people have about this. And I think we spoke about this today when we were preparing for the show, about this particular businessman who was speaking in Chemulingot, who I said it took him 10 years to recover from the first operation, Yvonne. And then when we were looking at pictures from Chemulingot, about 150 shops had already been closed. Literally, the business center was empty. And those who could leave had left because, of course, they were worried about their own safety, thinking that when the operation begins, they'll find themselves on the wrong end of things. And then there are those who are unable to leave. So, Yvonne, as we talk now, I think we have the live pictures from the DC headquarters.
We can see,
I think there's the member of parliament, yes? Yeah,
let's take a look at that. Yes. That looks like his lawyer, Dunstan Omari, and David Hussein as well. Let's listen in to that.
Looks like Dunstan Omari is everybody's lawyer.
Is the lawyer of the minute.
No, he's the overnight lawyer.
Late night lawyer.
Night shifted.
It seems. So our Seth Olale is there. Let's listen. Looks like, and hear what the interrogation was like.
You okay? As you Kenyans can see and the whole world, we are at the headquarters of the DCI. My client, Mheshimiwa, was in a very humiliating manner picked from the presence of his officers, dragged to the DCI on allegations that he is the mastermind, he's the person funding, he's the architect of the banditry in the north of the Rift Valley. We have come here. He has given his version of the story. He has never owned a white chopper, and it is all over that the alleged chopper that is supposed to be funding or transporting the bandits is white. Mheshimiwa has accounted for all the days since this issue started. And that is why he has been released to go home. He's not under any police custody. The issues in this matter is that Mheshimiwa was warned by a cabinet secretary that he will be arrested. That is not the way, because the CS has no mandate at all to arrest. He does not have the police powers of arresting. Article 244 and Article 245 gives the Inspector General of Police absolute power to arrest. He only takes direction pursuant to Article 157 from the Director of Public Prosecution. So that is why Mheshimiwa's arrest is a political witch hunt. Mheshimiwa comes from the Azimio wing of the politics of this country. He is the first one to be arrested, and we are urging the government not to politicize the war against banditry. Yes, we know quite a number of police officers have died. We have passed our condolences to the families of the gallant soldiers, the police officers who have died. But let that not be the reason why innocent members of parliament are being hauled to the DCI at the night. Mheshimiwa could have been summoned, or his lawyers could have been told, or the speaker could have been told that Mheshimiwa is required here. This is an act of humiliation, an act of devaluing the dignity of the honorable member of parliament. You've seen the number of legislators who have abandoned their duties to be in support with their colleague who has been arrested and humiliated. But we want to thank the DCI. The DCI has handled Mheshimiwa very professionally. They have understood his explanation, and that is why he has been released on P55 form. He will be required to be here tomorrow morning for further clarification. We have also demanded those who are putting complaints against Mheshimiwa to record a statement. Once they have recorded a statement, then Mheshimiwa can respond appropriately. But otherwise, this was a political witch hunt. This has no basis on law, and if Mheshimiwa is required anytime, we undertake that we'll provide him, we'll bring him here, his colleagues will bring him here. He's not a petty criminal. He has been a member of parliament. This is his third term. That tells you the quality and the trust the people he represents have in him. That tells you the type of respect Kenyans have in him for the number of debates and bills that he has manufactured. And that is why actually he was appointed a chair of a parliamentary committee. So let me allow one or two members to say, then Mheshimiwa will finalize what he wants to say.
Thank you, the media.
Let's move here. Let's exchange positions briefly.
We've come here in solidarity with our colleague, our legislator from Pokot South, who unfortunately this evening was picked in a manner that has been explained to you by Wakili and brought to the DCI. We were actually also wondering what he has done. And so we've come here and we've actually been told whatever brought him here. For us, actually, we think that will not be what can actually bring somebody in that manner to the DCI.
And that's what's happening live at the DCI headquarters. We'll try and take you back there when we hear from David Pekosing himself. But again, this is, what we were saying just a short while ago. I think, Gachuri, you were saying we will talk about it. There's politics involved, there's financing involved, there's a commercial aspect to it. We will get back to that in a moment. But we're talking about, things happen here in Nairobi, things are said about whatever, the motivation is for questioning or interrogation. But I think, the other thing is, on the ground, things are pretty different for the residents. Yeah. You were talking about that gentleman who I remember him saying he spent 700,000 shillings on stock for his shop during the previous operation 10 years ago in Nakuru, brought it to his shop in Chemolingot, and he said, was it a day or two later, the military came in and they burned and razed his shop down to the ground. He's still, of course, reeling from that. And these are some of the things. It's an important operation, but, it hurts people as well. And residents there know this. Residents in other places know this, right, Jamila?
Yes, true. And the only thing they're asking for is let this be done systematically. Yeah. If there's a way it can be done to cause less harm to them. And even this reminds me of operations which have been done in other parts of the country, because we keep talking about this being a perennial issue in the north. But then it reminds me of the Sabot Land Defense Force that was in Mount Elgon. From 2005, for almost 2 years, they were said to have killed over 600 people, looted, raped, and murdered, and theft and destruction of property. And at the time, the group was said to have some form of structure, leadership structure. Yep. There was a chain of command. They had all these sophisticated weapons, and they were really terrorizing people. And I remember the government initially had thought these guys were just common criminals. And then now they are categorized as organized militia. They are also offered amnesty by the government to return arms. In fact, they were supposed to have been paid about almost 25,000 shillings if you surrendered your weapons, which they did not. Serikali kaingia pale, and then now there was this whole operation that was done. Of course, the government was, this assault, large-scale government assault by the army was in March 2008. Of course, they were accused of human rights abuses. Yeah, there was looting, they claimed there was murder, there was torture, there was arbitrary detention. But then, by the time this operation ended, Mount Elgon ilirudi hali ya kawaida. Right. In fact, the leader, Wycliffe Matakwe, was killed in May of 2008. Yeah. But then now, mambo yakatulia. But then now, the price that people had to pay for that to happen. Yeah, the people are still reeling from it, who are still feeling the effects of this all these years later. And then now we look at the Shifter Wars that was in what was called the Northern Frontier District. Yeah. This was just shortly after independence, when we had ethnic Somalis who wanted to go into Somalia. They wanted to be part of Somalia just right after independence. And then there was this whole war that happened, and it took almost 4 years for there to be peace, and it needed a peace deal to be signed by the then Somalia Prime Minister. He was called Mohamed Igal. It was in 1967 for this to end. But since then, that area is still reeling from the effects of that, and has talked quite extensively about massacre. The Wagala massacre happened. That part of the country was forgotten and neglected. I think the advent of devolution has really helped open up that part of the country, but really the people in that area suffered for a very, very long time. Yeah. But then now we look at the price of having to deal with such a militia and all that when the army comes in, and the effect it has on people's lives, and the fact that it's not short term, it's very long term. That's why this operation needs to be done, I think, systematically.
Yeah, and you know, you just reminded me about that Wagala massacre. There's a book by, I believe it's called Salah Abdishir, you know, just detailing what happened, you know, during the Wagala massacre, for which many people, you know, still remember. But, you know, it's the same story, isn't it, Linus? We go through that, we claim a political witch hunt. There's obviously some serious financing lessons. I know you've already talked about, you know, what needs to happen next, but, you know, here we are again, you know, outside the DCI headquarters. We're talking about, you know, who has the right to arrest and what's, you know, what should happen, what shouldn't, you know, who will be questioned. I noticed, you know, the lawyer, Dunstan Omari, his careful choice of words. He said, you know, Pikosing will be required tomorrow at the DCI once again to clarify matters. So avoiding use of the word interrogated, questioned, probed, that sort of thing. You know, so, you know, here we are again. It seems like we're there. Maybe Gachuri and then Linus?
And worse still, Dunstan says the reason why Kosing is being arrested is because he's an Azimio member of parliament. Yeah. You see now, the political angling of a security operation, not necessarily what is the content of the investigation, but the political affiliation and persuasion finding its way into this kind of a conversation. Unfortunately, this is what happens with our country. Every time somebody is being asked to account for one action or the other, and especially if they're in leadership, there will always be that angling of I'm being asked because I belong to this party or that party, which I think is problematic because it tends to obscure the seriousness of the investigation and the real deal, the real issue that is being pursued. Natembeya, when he was being interviewed by Trevor together with the other team leaders who are here, he spoke about the role and the involvement of the political class in what we have been calling banditry up north. No lies that some of these political leaders have a role to play. And actually, Natembeya, we have his bite. Just listen to what he was saying.
The Samburu. You can only blame the Pokot and also fail to blame the Turkana. There are elements within all those communities that are perpetuating cattle rustling. Interestingly, the young men sometimes who do these things from different communities are in constant communication. It's not easy to get the Pokot and who will walk all the way and raid a Turkana kraal without having a local scout that are giving them directions. Actually, when I was RC, there were times you will arrest some of these people when you check their mobile phones. They're in constant communication.
Yeah, so it's not a random, accidental raid.
Yeah.
These things are systematic, well-organized, well-planned. And this is now where I think the government and the security machinery comes in. It is not possible, Yvonne, for ordinary citizens to be that well-organized to conduct raids. Yet, the government has a machinery, has intelligence, has equipment, has personnel, police officers who are graduating from our institutions every other day, 10,000, 6,000, 5,000 in their numbers, and we cannot be able to tackle the question of banditry 60 years into our independence. I think there had to come a time where the government would say this thing must end. Hopefully this will be the time, because we've had previous administration talk about it, from the Moi era to Kibaki time, Uhuru's time, and now President Ruto's time. Hopefully this will be the end, because if it isn't, even President Yvonne will come and tell us she will fight banditry.
Amen to that. Linus, you get the final word on this?
No, absolutely, and I agree with Francis. It's a question of when will this cycle be broken? Because it's gone on for a long while.
Yeah.
Even listening to Natembeya there, he is insinuating that, we know.
Yeah.
But also insinuating that nothing was done about it, and that should be quite unfortunate. When you look at this northern problem, especially Pokot, Marakwet, Turkana. Way back in 1981, Francis Loile Polisi Lotodo was also a Pokot leader, was also targeted by the police and accused of funding the activities of cattle rustling there. And then subsequently there, we've seen a number of other elected leaders from the Pokot region always emerging as suspects. You had Kamama, you had Kamket also being spoken of. But here is a problem, and toward the point that Francis was making, as long as we don't professionalize our security and intelligence, if our security and intelligence is reliant almost entirely on political instruction, this is where we'll end up. Because every arrest will be seen from a point of political correctness, where a policeman is not doing the job entirely based on the evidence at hand, but maybe on political instruction, which is unfortunately what informs our management of security. You know, we have a beautiful constitution that, you know, talks of the command of the National Police Service, talks of the command of the structures. And we have very good rhetoric going on about reforming the police and all that. But are we really prepared for a situation where a police officer, a police unit, a police post out there can actually do an investigation and arrest whoever it is and take them to court without interference from political instructions? Indeed, and very poignant question now that David Kosing is speaking.
On I think 9th, last week Thursday, I'm just shocked. Mimi nimeshangaa sana ya kwamba mimi nashikwa kwa sababu mimi naambiwa ati nilishikia watoto bond ambao walikuwa very poor, watoto kutoka Masol, watoto ni Wapokot, na wamekondema wao kwamba ni criminals, na kwa hivyo hakuna mtu anataka wao kupatiwa bond. Na mimi nauliza kwa nini, na mimi najuaje hawa? Mimi hata sijui majina yao, hata mimi siwahi kukutana nao. What I know is they are innocent boys, and that is why the court had seen it fit wapatiwe bond pale Kitale. Mimi sikupatia hao bond, ni serikali na ni sheria yetu ambayo ya Kenya ndio ilipatia vijana bond. Mimi najua, mimi ni mkaaji ya huko, mimi ni Pokot, kwamba wale walipelekwa kutini 7, ng'ombe yao ndio iliuawa tarehe 2, ng'ombe 200. Lakini kwa sababu polisi na sisi kama viongozi tulilalamika kwamba kwa nini ng'ombe yetu inapigwa risasi bure namna hiyo, ng'ombe 200. Tulipolalamika, nafikiri mdomo yangu na hata na vile mheshimiwa Murgora amesema Senator, maybe they are coming for them, kwa sababu sisi wote tulikuwa tunaongea maneno kama haya. Alafu baada ya hiyo polisi wakaenda kushika wale 7 ni owners ama wenye ng'ombe wenye waliwao 200. Na walikuwa wanaenda kuhesabu kuangalia kama ni ng'ombe gani na gani ndio iliwawa tarehe 2 na polisi pale Kainuku. So walipokwenda kuangalia ng'ombe ndio wakashikwa siku hiyo, wakapelekwa Lokicha, from Lokicha wakapelekwa Kitale. Sisi kama viongozi tukaenda kuangalia watoto wetu Kitale. Na baada ya kuangalia watoto wetu Kitale, serikali yenyewe ama kotini iliona kwamba ni nzuri kuwapatia bond. Mimi kweli nilikuwa kotini. Sasa wakasema ati kwa nini mheshimiwa Kosingo unaenda kupatia watu bond? Mimi sijawahi kuuliza swali kama hiyo katika maisha yangu. Na kuna viongozi wenzangu wa kutoka communities ambazo siko karibu na sisi waliongea mbaya sana. Mimi sijawahi kuongea mbaya. Mimi ni mtu ya amani. Mimi nimefanya peace. I was in Peace and Justice Commission before I became an MP. Kila mtu anajua namna hiyo. Mimi ni mtu ya amani. Na mimi sijawahi kuandika statement ya police anywhere in my life tangu mimi nizaliwe. Hii ni mara yangu ya kwanza tangu mimi nizaliwe. Hii ni term yangu ya 3 katika bunge, mimi sijaandika statement. Na hata wakanipigia message na kusema wewe kuja mheshimiwa Kosi, mimi ni peace, mimi nakuja. Lakini mimi nauliza, kwani kila Pokot ni nini? Kama mtu akiwa Pokot kwani criminal? Hao watoto wenye watu walikuwa ng'ombe yao, wanaenda kuangalia ng'ombe yao wanashikwa, wakipatia bond kwani ni criminal? Mimi nataka nione sheria katika Kenya hii ya kusema kwamba usipatie mtu bond. Mimi ningependa kuona. Kwa hivyo mimi nashukuru watu ya DCI. Mimi aliniambia twende, nikasema nikuja, gari yangu sasa iko KICC. Mimi ninashukuru wenzangu wa bunge wamekuja watanipatia lift sasa kwenda kutafuta gari yangu. Lakini mimi nataka niseme hii katika Kenya hii ya kwamba tafadhali Wapokot sio criminals. Na hatuwezi tukaleta mambo ya amani kupitia njia ya kuintimidate leaders. Hatuwezi tukapata amani kwa intimidation. Na kama mtu alitaka mimi iwe ni intimidated ili nisiongee na wenzangu kuhusu Wapokot, mimi nataka niambie hawa, I will never stop speaking ama kuongea juu ya watu wetu ambao wanaumia. Mimi nilichaguliwa na watu. Sikuchaguliwa na miti, nilichaguliwa na watu. Na kama hao watu wanaumia, mimi nitaongea. Na mimi nafikiri kuna watu wanasukuma hii maneno. Kuna mtu alinipigia simu jana na akaniambia Gosingu utaona. Na mimi nitakuja hapa kesho, baada ya kesho I will name. Mimi nitasema hiyo jina. Alinipigia simu akaniambia wako Gosingu, sasa wewe ulikuwa unaongea Kapenguria, wewe utaona. Sasa mimi nimeona. Hiyo ni asante. Lakini mimi nataka niwaachie leo hapa, sitaki kuongea maneno mengi. Mimi nasema Pokot wenye wananiona ama watu wetu wote, mimi niko salama. Mimi sijafanyiwa kitu, mimi niko salama. Lakini ile ya kusema ati mtu anashikwa sababu mtu amepatiwa bond, mimi nashangaa. Na mimi nataka nimalize kama ni intimidation ya kusema ati labda sisi viongozi ambao tumechaguliwa na raia tusiongee kwa niaba ya raia yetu, nataka niambia hata mkinishika mara 100 tutasidi kuongea juu ya watu wetu. Na Wapokot sio criminals. We are very peace. Umeishi na peace na Turkana from 2015 up to now. Sio criminals. So why are we being condemned as if Pokot the criminals? So nataka waambie wa Kenya, let us move towards peace. And when we are moving towards peace, let us face the truth. What is the truth? The truth is mambo ya propaganda, fitina, tuachane nayo.
And so that is David Pikosing, the Member of Parliament for Pokot South, after his questioning this evening at the DCI headquarters. We'll see what happens tomorrow when he goes back to, according to his lawyer, clarify issues. And it's all to do with bond that he paid for young men who were arrested and taken to court. We shall keep you posted on that development. I think we've already said quite a bit about what needs to happen. This needs to stop. As we conclude this and move on to our next one, just 2 tweets. Engineer Lazaro Kanyambok says, banditry in the North Rift is a pure result of marginalization. Can't be solved by tough talk, display of military might. Just open this area for development and education. Gerald